All right. Our last video lecture in this mini part of Unit 2 on intelligence and problem solving is Modules 2.8 A, B, C, D, Part 2. So in the last video lecture, we talked about different types of academic testing, the difference between achievement and aptitude tests. And we spent the majority of time talking about intelligence tests and how to calculate and understand what your IQ score means. Today's video lecture, we are going to focus on what are some problems that we have with intelligence tests. What are other forms or ways to measure intelligence or other definitions of intelligence? And then finally, is intelligence kind of the only thing that matters towards your success? So we are going to start with what are some of the negatives of IQ testing? When we look at IQ testing throughout the year since its inception, IQ tests were not always used in the best of ways, especially when we look at the use of it in the United States. Early on in its introduction, it was used to decide whether or not certain people would get jobs or not. It would determine military rank. It would determine what track you were set on in educational purposes, whether or not you could receive an education, where you could receive an education from, and what type of education that would look like. It impacted immigration status, whether or not you could come to the United States. They found that throughout the years, there's been a lot of biases that have been built into the test that favor individuals of certain races, ethnicities, of certain areas in which they grew up and certain types of families. There was a lot of biases tied into that. We also found that scores can be impacted with something called the stereotype threat or the stereotype lift. So we found that the stereotype threat can occur, that individuals sometimes fear confirming kind of the negative stereotypes about the social group that they're a part of. So this anxiety that they have about confirming or living up to the negative stereotypes can harm performance. So women may underperform on math tests when they're reminded of the stereotype that women are bad at math. They found that that's actually decreased the scores in women. In addition to that, something called stereotype lift has also occurred when individuals perform better because they are made aware of the positive stereotypes about their group. For example, if you tell men that they remind men of the stereotype that men excel in math, we found that men tend to do better on that portion of the test. So is that a good measurement of our IQ if those two things can impact it? And finally, probably the biggest negative use of IQ testing is in something called eugenics. And eugenics was the practice aimed to improve kind of the genetic quality of a population. And within doing this, they would try and exclude those who are deemed inferior by trying to essentially not let them have the same rights and privileges as others and favoring those who were considered superior. And so one of the measurements in eugenics was what your IQ was. And there was a famous case, Buck versus Bell in 1927. You can see that in the picture, we have the woman who was the kind of forefront of this case. She was born with a mental age of 9. And she had a mental age of 9. She was born to a mother who had a mental age of 8. She lived with an adopted family. The thought is that she was raped by her adoptive family member, by a family member in her adoptive family. When that occurred, they sent her off to a mental hospital, and they used this case to pass what they called a sterilization act. And in this, they ended up sterilizing 60 to 70,000 different people who were deemed a lower mental capacity and deemed inferior. And these individuals were sterilized so that they would not be able to have children ever. And so the use of this IQ testing to draw conclusions and to take away rights of individuals is very controversial. So we want to take IQ testing with a grain of salt. We want to make sure that it's used in the right ways. Today, the goal is that we are reducing stereotype threat. We are reducing kind of that inequality that we see in IQ testing scores by making it as equitable as possible, as well as not using it for those same purposes that it was once used for. Other forms of intelligence tests or other forms of ways in which people have defined intelligence and measured intelligence. Two of those, fluid and crystallized intelligence. As you see this chart, something that you're going to notice, the fluid intelligence is in orange and the blue crystallized intelligence is in blue. So I want you to take a second, pause this, look at this graph and tell me, what does it tell you about fluid and crystallized intelligence across the lifespan? So pause it. What are you seeing on this chart? Okay. So I hope you did that. And when you came back, you identified that there is kind of a split. Fluid and crystallized intelligence kind of stick together. And then right around 30 years old, fluid intelligence decreases while crystallized intelligence increases. I hope that that is a conclusion that you drew by looking at this chart. So the difference between fluid and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is like that type of intelligence that we can reason speedily and abstractly. It's our ability to solve logic problems. It's our ability to pick up a new cell phone and figure out its workings, to be able to open up a computer app and try and figure out and deduce how to utilize that. Those types of intelligences decrease as we get older. So the best comparison I can make is think about the difference between you getting a new iPhone and your grandmother getting a new iPhone. Who is going to have an easier time navigating and understanding how to make phone calls, how to download apps, how to interpret the interface of that app? So that's fluid intelligence. Just like fluid we drink, as we drink, it goes away. Same thing with fluid intelligence. As we get older, we are drinking more and it's going away. Our fluid intelligence decreases with age. In contrast, that we have something called crystallized intelligence. And this is our accumulated knowledge that comes from experience. This is that wisdom that older people tend to have. It's when you go to your grandparents for advice and they just seem to understand things in a way that you don't, or anybody who's older than you. It's that life experience that helps you to understand, make judgments, make decisions. And it gets better. We get wiser. The older we get, the wiser we become. The more accumulated knowledge that we have, the more life experiences we have to draw from. This grows, and this is what we should value in those of the older generations. A final type of intelligence is called emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is our ability to perceive emotions in others. It's a person who is able to recognize their emotions, understand the emotions of others. They're able to manage their emotions in healthy ways. They can adapt and change. They can build and maintain relationships. They can have effective communication. They understand other people's emotions. They offer comfort and support. They're those people who seem to know what to say to people who are struggling. They can read others' emotional cues much faster than others. They can manage conflict. They are the type that know what to say to a friend that's grieving or who's upset, or a friend that's joyful and happy. They have a strong connection between the emotions that somebody is sharing and their ability to interpret and understand those and to regulate their own emotions. So this is something that has been recognized as a skill that we need in order, or a type of intelligence that we need in order to be successful in life. We find that especially people who have high emotional intelligences tend to have better friendships. They tend to have more successful careers. they tend to be better parents. And that emotional intelligence is something that is so important to being able to build and maintain relationships and be successful. So even when you look at individuals with high IQ scores, but low emotional intelligence, their ability to parent is not nearly as successful as somebody who has a lower IQ score with a higher emotional intelligence. Finally, is intelligence an end-all be-all? Is whatever your intelligence is kind of how successful you're going to be? And there's one other thing that we have found that can help and help you be successful, and that is your mindset. They have found, I'm sure you've heard these buzzwords used in your classes before, the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Your mindset makes a huge difference in your success. It's not just what your IQ score is. It's not just what you inherit or what your environment has given you, but also your mindset. Somebody with a growth mindset, they have a focus on learning and growing. They don't view their abilities as fixed. They view their abilities as growing, changing, adjusting. Somebody who has a fixed mindset, this is a person who views intelligence, abilities, and talents as unchangeable, even with effort. That it doesn't matter how hard I try, I'm only going to get so far because I'm only so intelligent. Versus somebody with a growth mindset says, well, that can be grown. That can be made larger. I can be better, more successful with the efforts that I put in. And the more you have a growth mindset combined with a decent intelligence, that's going to be that combination that's going to help you be successful. So we're going to talk in class a little bit more about this fixed versus growth mindset. We're going to look at what research has been done on this idea of whether or not you see yourself as being able to grow and get better, or whether you see yourself as an end-all be-all to your IQ score. That is it for today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.